I would like to consider myself a fan of trying new franchises out, seeing what I may have been missing out for a long time, and if there is something I like in these new experiences, that'll be the style of the game. And definitely, a game that will always have style and with ease will be the games from the Devil May Cry series. This series is the literal embodiment of raw style. I feel like I rarely see series in the AAA genre that can compare to the raw energy that radiates from this entire series. And I mean, if the meme videos weren't proof enough, just take a listen to the OST of Devil May Cry 5 and you'll become a fan immediately. I know I did. You know, even though I consider myself to be a fan of the Devil May Cry series, that will honestly be a fat lie. I have only played the 5th entry of the series, Devil May Cry 5, and only now has the thought, maybe I should play the other games as well, ever come across my head. And so, here we are. I'm about to play Devil May Cry 1, also known as the original Resident Evil 4. Because yeah, that's right. This is in fact how the 4th entry was originally going to look like. More or less. Can't imagine Leon surviving that though. I want to see how Devil May Cry has aged. Is it still good? Well, if I don't tell you with the thumbnail of the video, then you've probably waited long enough. So, fuck, let's just jump right into. Yes, the smell of the early 2000s and very compressed cutscenes. How I've missed you. Yeah, I'm getting this out of the way. The game definitely looks like an early 2000s game. It doesn't necessarily look bad, just don't zoom in on their faces and you live. The cutscenes can definitely be a bit awkward at occasions, but overall it really isn't as bad as you may expect. A lot of the times, the action in the cutscenes can be still very much enjoyed, although the main thing about it is the janky ass models. But apart from that, yeah, the game looks alright. The cutscenes look very good. Obviously the games will get more visually appealing the more games we go through. That's a natural course of evolution after all. What I don't like about the visual presentation of the game is the pre-rendered cutscenes that look absolutely crunchy, because I mean, what the hell is this? Am I watching a video from YouTube in 2007? I understand that the cutscenes were probably not able to be altered without having to like pull off some wizard ass magic or something like that. I understand it, but that doesn't mean that I have to automatically accept it. I feel like when criticizing media, you need to have an understanding of why many decisions were made, even if that understanding is very base level. At the very least, have an educated guess, so your criticism or recommendations don't end up falling flat. Because imagine how fucking dumb I would look half the time, and I already look dumb as hell reviewing these stuff. Okay, that's great and all. The game has polygons. Lovely. What is my purpose in life though? Well, Dante is a devil hunter, owner of the agency called Devil May Cry. Don't ignore the question! Roll credits. And he is reached out by a mysterious lady called Trish, who seeks out Dante because of his new supernatural abilities as the son of the legendary knight Sparda, a demon who helped humans stop demonkind from taking over the world and the sworn protector of this planet. He's dead now, obviously. Dante decides to help out, mainly because he seeks revenge for what happened to his mom and brother. See, they were both killed by followers of the Demon King that Sparta defeated, probably out of revenge and whatnot, and Dante obviously wants to get his revenge right back at him! Oh yeah, that's pretty much the entire story. I know Devil May Cry isn't the holy grail of stories, much less for a game released in the year 2001, I mean it was competing with Sonic Adventure 2. But I mean, at least I expected there to be more something? A bit more in between. You literally never get to see the characters interact for like the first 12 or so missions, so like for half the game they never talk to each other, and it's so jarring the more the game goes on because, and spoiler alert, skip to whatever time I decide to put on the screen, the game really wants you to care about these characters. They want you to care about Trish and Dante's relationship. It's meant to be something tragic, like two people who could have gotten along if they met under different circumstances, but the reality is that the game simply doesn't give a damn about developing its characters. Dante stays the same old throughout, Trish stays the same old throughout as well, and the only times that you see them interact in the 4.5 hour long game are at the beginning and in some of the few cutscenes that play more than 70% through the game. There is an entire gap from one conversation through the other, and that is called a whole 3 hours from a 4.5 hour long game. Furthermore, what are we supposed to feel when it's revealed that Trish was a double agent? Are we supposed to be sad she tried to kill Dante in the first minute of the game? I don't know what you are, who, why, or when you are. Why am I supposed to care? Am I supposed to care? Is that the purpose? The game takes itself pretty seriously, so I feel like I should, I feel like I'm supposed to care at least a little. Was it too hard for them to make Trish like an interactable NPC? It's not like it hasn't been done before by Capcom. Was the development of this game messy? I know what happened with DMC2, and trust me, we'll get to that shit show later on. But I'm curious, my sources say nothing about messy development in DMC1. Just what happened in here? This scene.
I should have been the one to fill your dark soul with light.
It's one of the most meme scenes in video game history, and it deserves it every day of the week. And at this point, it's not only because of the voice acting. Well, it's not good, the voice acting is still absolute kind of ass, but the story just doesn't deserve this dramatic moment if you ask me. Especially not for a character that I simply didn't have any time to get attached towards, especially because I saw her once, and then we are at the end of the game! And speaking of voice acting, I mean, it was a Capcom game from the early 2000s, late 90s period. Obviously, voice acting wasn't refined back then, except for when it was. They have no excuse, but you know what? I'll excuse it. Because the game can be funnier that way, and maybe that's all I need in my life. Okay, you know what? I feel like I need to get off this game's back for a second. I feel like I'm being a bit too unfair. The game should have definitely tried more to get me to care about the story by at least showing me like 3 different cutscenes with two characters interacting. The game should have definitely had better voice acting by this time, and maybe the game doesn't hold up to today's standards graphically. But I can forgive it because the gameplay at the end of the day is the end all be all, so if the gameplay is good, then the game is good. What's the gameplay like? There are 23 missions, all occurring in the castle and the surrounding areas, in which you do what the mission tells you to do and vaguely make your way towards the objective. Go have fun. In the way you'll occasionally find yourself fighting against a group of enemies, and that's when the show can truly begin! Devil May Cry is a series in which you are trying to beat the enemies, but more than that, you are trying to look like the coolest motherfucker in the yard while doing so. You'll be convoying them, swing them into the air and bring them back to reality. Use one of the guns and blow their asses up or overwhelm them with the alien gun. Beat the shit out of them. They think that they've seen the best of me, but have you seen me throw these hands, brother? Oh, you think we're done? Nah. Sit back and enjoy me going into maximum overdrive. The Devil Trigger makes you more powerful, makes you faster, gives you new abilities, it heals you. It is a public menace to all enemies lying around. This thing is absolutely wonderful. And once you think you've seen it all, they give you Sparta. Oh my god, and it's like, don't mind if I do, brother. Listen, I won't lie. I suck hot chicken ass at this game, but my god, it's an absolute blast to fight the enemies. The only thing that I don't really like about the combat is the camera, which is one of the aspects that carry over from Resident Evil. And the fixed camera is fine for the most part, it's not a hindrance, but it really feels like it starts overstaying its welcome when the battles, and especially the boss battles, kick in. Sometimes it felt like I couldn't get the best angle as a result, sometimes I just did a swing and a miss with the attacks, and it was never enough to make me fully dislike the camera, but it was enough to move it from a school friend down to an acquaintance. Speaking of weird stuff, what's up with the mission structure? It said that it was added late into development, but what for? Honestly, it makes the game feel more repetitive than it should and overall hinders the quality of the overall product. In later DMC games, and by later I mean Devil May Cry 5 because remember that's all the experience that I have with the series, most of the time you're in completely new areas during the missions. Rarely do you go back to a place you've been at before, and even in the rare occasions that you do come back more powerful and with an expanded area to explore. But in here I just can't see the benefit of the mission structure other than to possibly help players keep track of what they're doing. Which, if that's the purpose, then good on them. Although a mission list maybe could have felt... Actually, I don't even know if those existed back then. Okay, but before I say anything else, can we simply talk about the sheer quality of the soundtrack of this game? I feel like I should talk about how Capcom just always makes the best soundtracks ever. They are up there and always with the games that don't need it. The later Devil May Cry games will definitely feature better songs overall, but you know, this game still has some bangers in there, and I like those ones. I like those bangers. And that's Devil May Cry. And overall, damn, this game is kinda good, no? I feel like for a first game in the popular series, Devil May Cry is surprisingly still very good, even today. I was kinda going into it with the expectations of it being a cool game, but not one that was great, especially compared to the ones that came after it. But honestly, I was very shocked and pleasantly surprised to see that I was wrong. This game is an absolute banger. I think it speaks volumes to the level design of the game that 22 or so years later, people can look at this game compared to the evolution of the Devil May Cry series as a whole and be like, yeah, So pretty good. The story may not be the best, the graphics are definitely outdated, and the voice acting is laughable at times, but the game is absolutely stylish in its gameplay, which means that you should definitely play this game if you ever get the chance. It's on every modern platform and computer, so I don't see what's holding you back. Well, that's all you're here from me today. If I'm talking about games next time, I'm probably gonna talk about Devil May Cry 2, then 3, and then probably the rest of the series. But for now, let's just focus on the present. Maybe hit the sub button while you're at it. I'm trying to get to at least 1,000 subscribers by the end of the year. I'm just a random stranger on the internet that you happen to meet, but hey, just call me Sulu. You know, if there is anything that I've learned from playing video games, is that normally the worst game in that trilogy is the third one. But boy, do I have a third with me today. I don't think I've ever felt like I should have listened to YouTubers more than me playing Devil May Cry 2 immediately after the first game. Free will was a mistake, be a follower, not a leader! Everything about this game is simply perplexing in every single way. It feels like even once you comprehend all the steps that were taken for this game to come out the way that it did, it still manages to surprise you in all the good and bad ways. You know it's mostly the bad ways. It feels like literally the best aspect of this game is that if it wasn't for this game existing, there probably wouldn't have been a DMC3, and as a result, all the ones that came after them. But, okay, maybe I'm getting a bit ahead of myself. How did we get here? Once Devil May Cry 1 finished development, Capcom decided to immediately start working on the sequel made by a different division of Capcom, whose main expertise with video games are arcade titles. As a Mega Man fan, I can say that this is not a very good time. During development, they wanted to change up a couple of aspects compared to the original. Small changes, nothing minor, just, you know, they may have changed some aspects that everyone originally liked. They didn't really like the direction that Dante's character was going through in Devil May Cry 1, so they decided to change that. They decided to make the game easier, and they made the story be overall a bit more serious, because everyone loved the 10 minutes of story in Devil May Cry. Oh my god, this team is stupid. They quite literally admitted, we kind of forgot to see what the people who bought the original even fucking liked. My brother, we fumbled! I did not even know my boys could do that, what the fuck? The entire project was being screwed over so hard behind the scenes that they had to get another director to replace the original one, which, by the way, I have never even seen be mentioned. So for everything that I know, he was taken out to the backyard and erased from all of the data records in Japan. This director basically carried the entire project through hell and back and managed to make the game playable, which I mean, if that's one of his miracles, then I feel like you get the idea of how DMC2 came out in the first place. This is clearly taking a bit too long to summarize, so I'm just gonna get straight to the point. I'm just gonna summarize where I was going with this story time. The game obviously came out to very mixed reviews and disappointment from everyone working in the project. So much so that the director that they replaced the original one with, Hideaki Itsuno, basically said, I cannot let this be my legacy, and immediately went to Capcom and basically told them that he'll make a DMC3 for free, so please, for the love of God, just let me be the director of an actually good game. And obviously I'm exaggerating here, but my god, I find it so funny because what I understood from this story, what my brain took from this story was that the man did DMC3 out of spite, and that's honestly my version of history. DMC2 is just an absolute mess in every way, shape, and form. Everything about this game just makes it clear that the game was a mess to develop, and it was a series of bad choices that just so happens to at least land in one leg because Itsuno came at the very end and just decided to make the game playable. And after looking at all of this overwhelming evidence pointing to the very obvious observation that DMC2 was not good, I still chose to look at everyone dead in the eyes and say, but what if I play it anyway? I was so sure that there was no way the game was as bad as people were saying. They have to be exaggerating to some capacity. They have to be. No, they were not. I am sorry for mistrusting everyone. Jesus Christ! How can I even begin? The story? Probably not, I didn't pay any attention to the story. Something about freeing an island from a demon or something like that. The only thing I was focusing on is finding out what machine they were using to suck out the charisma out of my boy Dante. What happened to you? I know they wanted Dante to be a more serious Dante, but I feel like they just straight up made him a robot on this game. He has no discernible character traits apart from a coin flip he does occasionally, which, I'll admit, it's pretty cool. But there isn't really any personality behind that, so he's a piece of wood in this game. The entire game kind of feels lifeless as well. It's hard to describe it, but there was an atmosphere and style in the original Devil May Cry that came from the setting of the Island Mansion that simply isn't there in DMC2. The setting, in comparison, is remarkably generic with nearly nothing to make the setting stand out from any other PS2 game, not to mention the fact that there is no color or anything. It's 50 Shades of Grey on this bitch. The enemies aren't much better either, and I mean they aren't bad, it's just like I feel the team had a certain vision of putting helicopters and tanks as normal enemies, and I don't really share that vision with them. The one positive thing that I will say about this game is that thanks to it DMC3 exists, but also the animations weren't all that bad. They definitely feel like an improvement in some areas from the first game, and to be fair to the game, I do also quite like a lot of Dante's animations when doing certain attacks, especially when he does like that double jump and he starts firing downwards. And that's honestly the best thing that I can say about the combat. Oh, brother, I don't know what it is about the combat in this game, but it just makes me want to go to sleep. It's quite incredible. I have never been so bored at combat like this. It's genuinely quite impressive, really. They actually managed to take away pretty much everything good about the first game and thought that people will like it. In the original Devil May Cry, you unlock multiple new weapons that all have their uses and shortcomings, and the game constantly encourages the player to change between these weapons to be the most stylish man in the Milky Way. Or perhaps you simply have some weapons that you like and some which you don't. I mean, I didn't use most of the guns, admittedly, apart from like the alien gun, the ray gun, I don't know what it's called, and the standard dual handguns. But it's like, that's fine. Everyone has preferences. And Devil May Cry 2, however, there's a new mechanic that throws all of this into the ocean and leaves it to drown. These are Ebony and Ivory. And these are all the weapons that you're getting in the goddamn game. Yeah. You may think that there are more guns and swords to use, but no. No, the basic guns are all you need in the game. These are some of the most game-breaking weapons that I have ever seen, but not in a way where it makes the game more fun, but in a way where it makes the game more bearable. The enemies are so damn spongy in this game. You'll be hitting them for eons before you take them down, but before you realize that there's another 5 of them jumping you all over the place. And that'll be fine if the combat was at least good. I don't know what happened here, but everything about the combat feels slower, more sluggish, less satisfying, and overall just inferior to the first one in pretty much every conceivable aspect. You don't get new skills the more the game goes on. Instead, you simply get a weapon and upgrade it to make it stronger, which is hella lame. One of the best aspects of DMC was the progression in the character, but there's no progression here. I don't feel more powerful. I feel like the meds need to be though. The combos that are here aren't even that satisfying to pull off either. The animations may have improved on certain areas, but they feel slower in comparison and make the entire game feel like a drag. You would think that would be the last thing to happen in a game where you're swinging that shit with a sword. That sounds cool by default. Dante also feels floatier, which isn't automatically a bad sign, but it doesn't really help out on the situation here. And the fact that I gotta run around these empty deserted excuses for levels is really just rubbing salt on the wound. The only way that you can make the game more bearable is by using the guns, straight up. Simply because they are oddly enough the weapons that do the most damage, or even more than swords. Especially when you go on Devil Trigger, which, are you looking at how much damage I'm doing here? I don't even think the music is a redeemable factor here. I just don't remember anything from the OST, so I don't really like this game on nearly every level possible. Honestly perplexed, because the more that I think about it, the worse the game becomes. There is literally zero good that it did inside of the game, and I can't even say that it's so bad it's good because it's just mind-numbing. The enemies are pathetic with how they're designed, and the bosses, dear mother of god, the bosses are some of the most spongy, tanky enemies you will ever fight. You will spend like 20 minutes on this boss fight alone, and that is not a good sign. The only saving grace for most of these is that they at least finish, but like, I just realized the bosses don't even interact, it's just hands on sight. I was so bored out of my mind that I genuinely dropped the game after mission 11 or 12 out of 18. I know that it ain't fair to review a game without finishing it. But come on, when I finish like 2/3 of the game, I don't give a damn. If the game is not interested in being good, I'm not treating it with respect either. It was so bad that I immediately grabbed my Steam Deck, downloaded it, and started playing Devil May Cry 5 just to cleanse my soul from the atrocities that I had to sit through. This may just be one of the worst games that I've ever played, and I will never recommend anyone play it under any circumstance. I do like to sometimes recommend games that may not be my cup of tea to other people because, you know, maybe they'll find something that they like, but genuinely, it's one of the biggest wastes of time you could like ever imagine. And if you're playing the HD collection, skip out on this one and just go straight to 3. Speaking of 3, next time you see me here, I'll be talking about Devil May Cry 3. Although the video may take a bit longer than the video about 2 and 1 to produce, because Devil May Cry 3 is a longer game than Devil May Cry 1 and 2. But that's all you get from me. I'm just a random stranger you met on the internet. But for now, just call me Suda. Fellas, I'm afraid to say that the rumors were true. I am indeed dripping just for this game. It is that good. Before I played any of the DMC games, there were a couple of things that I understood about the series. The first one was a good beginning, although it can be outshined by the later entries in the series. 2 is the bad one. DMC Devil May Cry has the worst title I've ever heard. DMC 4 is there, and that DMC 5, but more so DMC 3 Dante's Awakening were considered to be the pinnacle of the series by far. I played DMC 5 last year, and when I played it I thought, that's it, the series has peaked, and I've only played one of them, how much better can the games get? But I always see people saying that DMC 3 was that game, it was simply that good, it had that dog in it, and I was always left with the curiosity. Until now. After DMC 2, I'm fairly confident that my expectations could not go any lower than the core of the planet, so with everything to gain and nothing to lose, I boot up DMC Devil May Cry 3, Dante's Awakening, and what did I think? Jackpot. Well, this game is fucking incredible.
Footsteps can never follow. If you want to live tomorrow, still a soul for a second chance.
Okay, first off, I need to mention the immediate jump in quality in many different aspects of the game, but the main one that actually surprised me was the development of the story in the game. One of my biggest issues with DMC 1 and DMC 2 is that it felt like they really wanted me to care for the story, but they never gave the story enough time to actually do anything whatsoever. While it felt like DMC 1 wanted me to care and feel anything when Trish betrays Dante, I instead felt nothing because I didn't feel like there was enough time for the player to care for the character, and as a result the plot fell flat on its fucking face. DMC 2 not only had the same faults of the first game, but also featured characters with the opposite of what I would deem as personality, so I didn't care to see what happened in the cutscene here because Dante was a piece of cardboard that had a single trait that they try to pass off as a near personality. You start Devil May Cry 3 and meet the city clown 3 seconds in and his name is Dante. That is some heavy whiplash. Now see, this is the Dante that I know and love from DMC 5. The personality of this man is through the roof. He's just a naturally cool guy in this game. They cracked the jackass trait of his character to the limit, and it's the most entertaining thing in the world and makes every single cutscene a blast to watch, because you just want to see what new thing this man-child does next. Dante is generally a more goofy character, mostly on his own lane for most of the game, as his reason for even participating in the plot for half the game is petty brother rivalry. In DMC 3, the story is that Virgil, who is Dante's brother, erects a tower in the middle of the city which is causing absolute destruction, and the objective of the tower is to open the gate between the human world and the demon world, and I guess Virgil wants to do that for ultimate power or something like that. I don't think they fully explained that, but that's what made the most sense to me. Dante, on the meanwhile, is eating pizza and trying to figure out the name for his recently opened devil hunting service. But before he can come up with the name, the demons make a Swiss cheese out of this man, but nope! Okay, I actually love these character moments for Dante. It really goes to show just how much of a laid-back guy he is, and also show the immaturity of his personality. After he gets the invitation to the tower, Dante decides to go, but because he wants to beat Virgil's ass, not because he actually wants to solve the issue of, you know, him trying to open the gates of hell. During the ride, he meets this lady, which he just calls Lady because she never tells him her name. Anyways, she hates demons, hates her dad for killing her mom to get demon powers and trying to do bad shit in general, and she also hates Dante for most of the game. Now see, Dante doesn't really get why she's going through all these troubles, especially considering that she's a human and can very easily die thanks to the demons inside the tower. On the other hand, when he does meet Virgil and fight him, it's again because of petty brother rivalry, and subsequently he gets his ass handed to him in one of the coolest cinematics in the game, and the next time he fights him, it's basically to get payback for the first round. As I mentioned, the story is remarkably not that complicated, but what makes it work is that it uses its cards very well and makes the most with what little they actually have to offer, and they manage to tell a story that, no, it's not complicated, but you're equally invested in it because the characters are simply that well developed. After the first interactions with Virgil and Lady, Dante goes through some substantial growth. He starts understanding and relating to Lady and her family conflict, as this is also technically his family conflict, not only because of Virgil, but because his father was a legendary hero that closed off hell from Earth. So he's also technically fixing his own father's mess. At the end of the game, when you fight Virgil, Dante isn't fighting for himself, but for the entire world and what's correct. He understands that Virgil is too dangerous and his need for power is gonna lead him to do some very dangerous stuff. He needs to be put down. The story simply develops its characters well, and because of that, I find it way more enjoyable than anything the last two games offered. Speaking of better than 2 and 1, let's talk about the music of the game, because oh my god, it's just, the music in this game just makes me want to, woo, ah shit! I don't know what they put in the water of the people making the music, but my god, it's just such a well-made soundtrack. It perfectly fits the style of Devil May Cry, and more than that, the silly fun of the series overall. Taste the Blood is a diss track, and who it's dissing depends on whether you're ass at the game or goated with the sauce. The second battle theme is also extremely catchy, and I mean, Devils Never Cry. I mean, it's one of the best pieces of music ever made in the history of Capcom and video games in general, and works as a very good way of knowing Dante's character. The graphics have also... Whew, man, look at that, they look so good. While I didn't find the action of the last two games and their cutscenes to be necessarily bad, I did think it could definitely be better. Now in DMC3, a lot of the cutscenes are just so much more, in every way, more dramatic, funnier, more action-packed and better choreographed. Everything about it screams SS stylish. I just can't stress how fun Dante is. He's a goofy, over-the-top character that does a smash presentation on every new weapon he gets. He's the best. The combat in this game is generally the best combat I've seen so far, and it's easily up there alongside the combat of Devil May Cry 5. It's simply that fun. You get a lot of weapons in this game, and they are all extremely fun to use, although I'll admit I'm not the biggest fan of the guitar. I thought it would have been cooler than what it ended up being. It just didn't feel as fun as the rest of them. But that's just me. The sword returns and the fist do as well, and they're both equally as fun as they were in DMC1. The fist is a dumb unga boonga weapon, and the sword is still an extremely versatile weapon that you will get the most use out of in the game. The two new weapons are also not that far off. The nunchucks feel different, no doubt, but it is still equally as fun as the rest of the weapons, and Agni and Rudra are probably my favorite weapons in the entire game. They are a dual sword that can combine and do so much wild stuff. The entire game just plays well. Dante constantly grows in strength and gets new abilities not only through the weapons but also through style switching, which is a new mechanic that was introduced in DMC3. You have 4 different styles that you can switch through, and they all have their unique uses. Trickster gives you a dodge that is especially useful in bosses and allows you to be better positioned in battle, and it's overall more useful than the dodge roll already available. Gunslinger gives you more strength to the guns, but Swordmaster gives you new attacks with every weapon, and I barely use Guardmaster because of me not being very good at the game. The game also returns to a DMC1 way of level design in which you explore one place and all the parts of the place are interconnected, which just allows the player to truly see the effect of the narrative in certain ways. The tower changes as the game goes on, and you can feel the impact of the narrative even more now compared to before. The place is also just very well designed and very fun to explore. The one aspect that I will say I wasn't the biggest fan of was the enemies. Some of them were fun to fight, but some of them not so much. Some of those enemies simply felt like a chore. There were too many that felt gimmicky, and it felt like some were simply just like too tanky and annoying for the sake of it. But that's really my only complaint, to be honest. To answer the question posed at the beginning of the video, yes, I do believe that DMC3 is that good. Most of the time, the game is an action-packed game with masterful music and very well done graphics with an engaging story that kept me wanting to know simply what came next. It's totally recommended.
And just like we've done the last couple of times, after 3 comes Devil May Cry 4. We are getting much closer to DMC5, honestly. That's the one that I'm most excited to talk about. But I just have to be a bit more patient until then. But hey, that's all you're gonna hear from me. I'm just a random stranger you met on the internet. But hey, just call me Suda.
Devil May Cry 4 is very weird, and I don't know how to feel about it. Devil May Cry 3 was such a good game. Great combat, great story, great music, sometimes mediocre enemies, but other than that, the game is pretty good. This was normally considered to be the pinnacle of the series before the 5th entry came out, but one question always stuck in my mind. What the hell is the deal with DMC4? I hear so many people saying just as many good things about the game as I hear bad things about it. It feels like it contributed a lot to the series while also feeling less substantial than what DMC3 and the prior entries offered beforehand, and hell, this game came out after DMC3 and before DMC Devil May Cry, so it feels like its impact is lesser in that regard as well. And most of the good that it introduced simply feels like a lesser refined version of what Devil May Cry 5 would eventually do. This game is weird, and while I feel like it's flawed in a bunch of ways, I still think it's very influential to the overall series and a very fun entry to the Devil May Cry series. Maybe. Let's just get on with it. See, one of the most notable things about DMC4 is that the story is quite boring. Like, very boring. The cutscenes themselves are not bad, and the action and comedy inside them are actually pretty good. Nero and Dante are still the best parts about these cutscenes, and by that I mean Dante steals the show every single goddamn time he even appears on screen. I will argue he is just as good and funny as he was in DMC3. Hell, I'll argue he's even funnier. Now here comes the but, and this is a very big but. He isn't the main protagonist of the game. Hell, you can't even play as him until you're halfway done with the game. For the majority of the game, the main protagonist is going to be the newcomer Nero, which is said to be a descendant of Sparda, also known as Virgil's son. Because as we all know, the man was a monster unleashed, but especially a freak on the sheets, brother. Nero is an odd case. While I don't think that he is necessarily a bad character, he always felt a bit boring to me. He never really grows from the beginning of the game to the end of the game, apart from not hitting his arm, and Dante I guess. But even then, it's not like accepting his demon heritage is the main point of the story. It's actually very minor in the grand scheme of things. Half the story is just about Nero chasing after Dante because the church he goes to got sad after Dante committed a couple of crimes. And when Nero discovers that the church was a true evil all along as they're trying to do something relating to Sparda, is every conflict in this series about Sparda? Forget a good story for Devil May Cry 6, I want the villain to be a Walmart employee who hates his boss or something, I don't know. As I was saying, when Nero discovers that the church is kind of evil, they then proceed to kidnap his Wonder Bread of a girlfriend, which I swear has the personality of, well, Wonder Bread. There's nothing remarkable about her. And then Nero proceeds to just dip after mission 12 and have Dante take all the glory for the next 6 missions. Then Nero comes back just in time for the final boss and the game finishes. Well, that was the story ever made. My problem isn't even so much that the story is bad, but the fact that the story is bad after they put so much effort in the story of DMC3. But okay, the game is what matters the most, yada yada yada. How is the game? The game more or less follows the structure of the last game. One interconnected environment which you'll explore completely as the game progresses, and then explore a second time because Capcom really liked these stages. I'm getting ahead of myself. For the first 11 missions of the game, you'll play as Nero, switching to Dante after mission 12 and playing as Nero for the final 2 missions. The stages are considerably more linear than 3, but honestly I don't really find that a bad thing. I actually find these levels for the most part a bit more interesting than 3 if you ask me. You solve more puzzles, you do more platforming, and overall I like these levels a bit more. As Nero! When it comes to Nero's combat, if I had to describe it in any way, it would be like a simpler version of Dante with his own belts and whistles. The gameplay is still largely the same, kill enemies and look absolutely fabulous as a byproduct, and you'll be doing a lot of that here, but I can't help but feel like after a while Nero can be kind of stale. Dear mother of God, why is it so hot in here? Siri, temperature in Fahrenheit. It's 87 degrees in here, what the fuck? Nero has two things to distinguish him from Dante, his sword Exceed and his Devil Arm. Nero's sword can be charged up and unleash more powerful versions of otherwise normal attacks. This is known as the Exceed mechanic, and it's honestly a lot of fun, but what mainly sticks out about Nero's combat is his Devil Arm, which can serve as a command grab which has a lot of versatility. It can grab enemies, be a grappling hook, it can be a free win button. Now don't get me wrong, I think that the mechanic is very fun, grab a motherfucker and go for... I just feel like the mechanic could have been deepened or further explored. Maybe grab and use an enemy's weapon and, I don't know, maybe have different combos depending on the direction of the stick. Being entirely honest, it feels like Nero's combat shows all its glamour. Is that how you say it? Shows all its glamour immediately, and it slowly burns out as the game goes on. It's fun, but it feels like it gets stale as the levels progress because you unlock all the major combos early. At least I unlocked all the major moves and combos early. That I'm talking about myself here. Nero is a remarkably simple character who isn't bad to control or play as, far from it. It just feels like the experience he brings when compared to Dante is comparably simple. Probably because that was the entire point. When you unlock Dante, the training wheels are off. The game tells you good luck and proceeds to roll you down the fucking Everest, because if Nero was a Smash character, Dante would be like all the complicated fighting game characters combined into one. Dante is way better than he was in 3, as not only now does he have access to all his weapons at the same time, but he also has access to all his styles at the same time. Meaning that you can be as lost in the sauce as a fucking needle in a haystack because oh my god, this can be overwhelming to newcomers. Doesn't stop it from being hella fun. I actually used Royal Guard in this game, and it's pretty damn fun if I do say so myself. And the new Rose weapon that you get is really creative, and I would love to see it return in other DMC games, because honestly, I really liked it. And the same goes for that weird gun that they give you as well. The only problem I have with Dante is that it's at this point in the game where the game truly starts saying that it wasn't its fault that you died, it was simply a skill issue. Dante is so much more complicated and nuanced than Nero. Not only are his basic weapons from when you unlock him alongside the style switching already more complex than what Nero has to offer, but that is only expanded by the skills that you buy, the weapons that you get at very fast speed since you get like a weapon every stage basically, and the increasing enemy difficulty which leads to Dante being a very hard character to fully grasp, let alone master him. Now don't get me wrong, I love playing as Dante exactly because of this. I can play as him and I can pretty much do anything I want and have a blast while doing so, but it can feel daunting going from playing as a coughing baby to the fucking hydrogen bomb. I think that Dante is far and away the better character in this campaign, and honestly it's a bit of a shame because he doesn't really get much time to shine before the game decides to shove you back to the dead weight. And you can't have me play as the level 16 New Game Plus character just to drop me back to a level 20 character with like 20% of the skill tree unlocked! Did I like this game or did I simply like Dante that much? I really cannot tell. All of Dante's weapons are extremely useful and pretty fun, especially since with the style switching you could just go crazy with all the different mechanics and it all feels so good. I am fairly confident in saying that if DMC4 had a campaign with just Dante, then I would probably like the game more than DMC3. I do really think that his gameplay and weapons are that much better. It's just a shame to what happened to everything else surrounding his gameplay. Okay, so, did you love Nero's levels? Great. Do them all over again, you dumb idiot! Dante has no original levels of his own. From the moment you get to play as him, you start right in the point where you finish the prior mission as Nero, and you are making your way back to where Nero started his adventure in this game. The problem is that now you have to explore the same levels, which are sometimes words between you and me, just letting you know. And furthermore, refight the same bosses while you're at it. Is this island just a straight line? The bosses in this game I actually do enjoy more than 3 as well, but I don't enjoy them enough to replay them 3 fucking different times in the same campaign. Screw Mega Man, this is the true boss rush game, my god! There is such a thing as repeating a boss fight too many times, and Sonic knows a lot about that. However, it seems like this game isn't too far behind. The game just repeats content like this throughout the entire campaign, and oddly enough, it only gets worsened by the other 2 playable campaigns. I didn't record footage of the other 2 campaigns because dear mother of god would that be a time sink, but just know that yeah, you do play the game as Trish, Lady, and Virgil, which gets its own campaign by the way, and they're all basically the same thing, but oddly enough, Virgil is probably the worst campaign because he never changes with another character, so you just play the levels twice and refight the same bosses 3 different times. Now I know that DMC 1 and 3 also had you fight different bosses again and again However, the difference is that 4 just simply feels worse because they're already rehashing a lot of content. The enemies are also a huge issue of the game. See, it's one thing to have a couple of enemies that made me groan, but I feel like that happens with nearly every new enemy in 4. There are some enemies that after a while I learned the trick to defeating them and that's that. It's fine, they're done and I can grab enjoyment from beating them. But some of the enemies just simply felt like a drag. They either don't get hit stun like nearly ever, have too much health, or just plain cheat like the guys in the jungle level which can just randomly damage you in the middle of a combo of not just Are you kidding me? The game feels so close to greatness. The graphics, the controls, and the combat mechanics are far better than DMC3, but so many other things make the experience almost fall apart completely. The enemies are simply not fun to fight, too much content is repeated throughout the campaign, and the story and music, which I forgot to mention, but it's not bad, it's just not as good as 3, all make the game falter in comparison to anything else in the series. Devil May Cry 4 is not a bad game, but it is a frustrating case of wasted potential. But hey, that's all I got to say. I'm just a random stranger you met on the internet. But hey, just call me Suro. Reboots are a good idea, but oftentimes they end up doing more harm than they do good. So many franchises have been killed or stayed dormant after launching a reboot, the Crash and Spyro reboots to give a couple examples. Maybe the series is looking to bring new life into the series, which can work in some cases, but in others, well, it can just alienate the original fans of the product. Reboots can and have worked in the past with the likes of Tomb Raider and Doom, but sometimes they can turn out like Sonic 06 and whatever that Bomberman reboot was. Now, with all of that information out of the way, DMC, Devil May Cry. I'm glad the game didn't get a sequel based on the title alone, Jesus Christ. Horrible name aside, I actually haven't heard that much about this game ever. It came out as an attempt to draw in more fans to the Devil May Cry series, but didn't sell as much as Capcom wanted it to, aka the game didn't even sell that badly. So, as a result, they just kind of left it there as the awkward part of the family that nobody likes talking about, and a couple years later they went and did DMC5. And I feel like that, oddly enough, helped this game out. Now the game can be seen for what it was and not what it wasn't, and hopefully that allows it to be better seen by the eye of the public. Now, I do want to say that I'll be playing the PC version, which lacks a couple of things from the enhanced PS4 version, but I think I'll be just fine without the extra features. That's all the time for needless talking, because seriously, I just want to get onto DMC5 and finish this marathon at this point, oh my god. The game starts out and the first thing that we see is a businessman. Go on. And then a man having a threesome. The fuck? The game is a completely different timeline from the normal DMC timeline, but it still shares some similarities to the original games. But one of the things it does not share is our favorite Devil Hunter because... And I know this is beating a dead horse. I too am about to complain about Dante's design and personality. Generally, the design isn't even the problem. The design is fine, it's passable, it's serviceable, and it gets the job done. It's achieving everything that it's trying to be, and for that, it works. The problem is that they're trying to pass this as a character that looks and more especially acts entirely different from Dante as Dante. Capcom was at their office thinking with Team Ninja, actually, how involved was Capcom with the game? I know they were involved in at least making Dante's design the way that it is. Whatever. They were thinking with Team Ninja on how to make Dante more relatable, and probably underpaid intern screamed out. Sucks. I am not gonna lie, I stopped paying attention to the plot immediately after that cutscene because it just really left a bad impression in my mouth, and from what I understand, I wasn't really missing out on much. The story is apparently quite mediocre, and the ending isn't even that satisfactory, so I'm glad to know that I avoided that bullet. I think that it's fine to try and appeal to the West and whatnot, but what part about this is in any way relatable? Let alone appealing. The story has Dante team up with his brother, who he just remembered even existed, and try to take down Mundus, the villain from the first game. Yeah, the businessman? Yeah, that's him. I could have never guessed. Listen, I'm not about to criticize the story any more than I just did, because really, that's all that I know of the main story. Again, I did not pay attention to it whatsoever, I skipped every cutscene. I just didn't really find the main character to be that appealing, and he's not normally that I would normally root for. But, whatever. Also, I just have to call this out for a second. Virgil's redesign looks like an employee at a hotel. Now hold on there, bastard. What about the underrated part of the title that you capitalized? Wait a minute, just let me cook for a second. The story was a story that starts and ends. However, what the game lacks in the story department, it more than makes up for it in the gameplay because, and I may just be spitting hot takes in this place, but I feel like the gameplay is just as good, if not a bit better than even Devil May Cry 3. The game has the same structure as the prior games. Stages are definitely more linear now, but I never really found that to be an issue because I found the stages to be good enough. Maybe a bit basic at times, but overall the stages I found very enjoyable. Now the thing that really matters and the thing that I really want to get into is the combat of the game, you know, the bread and butter. The thing that will either make you like the game or despise it. And I am glad to say that the gameplay is an absolute blast. I feel like the thing that I noticed the most when playing the game was that the enemies were much more fun to fight than the enemies in DMC3, and more so especially DMC4. Some may still take a time to fully master fighting against, but a lot of the time they're still pretty fun. And sometimes you do have to think, otherwise you will get smacked around silly. Like, there's still some enemies that have insane amounts of super armor and are tanky and the entire thing, the entire 9 yards. But they are also fun to fight. Their attacks are well telegraphed, there's a certain challenge to them. And I feel like the reason that I like these enemies so much is also because I like the moveset that they gave Dante for this game. When starting the game, I was getting fucking bamboozled by the control scheme. Launching enemies in the air has its own dedicated button now, there's a dodge roll, there's no lock on, and to use different weapons you have to press one of the triggers and then press the attack button. Muscle memory is a bitch when it comes to this control scheme, but once I fully got used to the control scheme, it all felt completely natural, and I gotta tell you that playing the game simply felt good. It definitely has to do with the animations and the visual effects as well. I mean, when I hit a motherfucker with these hands, that shit's crunchy! Many of the weapons are very fun as well. In this game you have 5 weapons: the sword, the fist, the axe, the scythe, and the shuriken. And they simply feel satisfying to use. The weapons all feel powerful, they have impact. And I always feel like using all these weapons, which is something that not even DMC3 managed to do. I wasn't that big of a fan of the guitar, and even other weapons like the fists I didn't like as much as the others. The levels are also surprisingly distinct from each other and feel very memorable, and I, again, have to thank the graphics for that. I really like the way in which the game looks. I already mentioned how I like the animations for the weapons as it gives them importance and impact, but I also like the way in which the world is designed. In the game, oftentimes you get transported into what they call limbo, which is like an alternate version of the human world, and oftentimes it takes the normal looking places of the human world and twists them around their head, quite literally in one of the levels. Ignoring the main characters and villain, I generally do think that the game is very visually pleasing, and really on the topic of presentation, the only thing that I'll say I'm a bit underwhelmed by is the lack of good, memorable music like the other games. Is it just me or am I finally running out of creative things to say about these games? I think the creative burnout is finally kicking in, woo joy! DMC Devil May Cry is a really fun game. It nails the gameplay so damn well and the graphics are incredibly good. It's just a shame that the story and music were so subpar, otherwise it could have been even better than it already was. But hey, that's all the time that I have for today. I'm just a random stranger you met on the internet. But hey, just call me Suro. And here we are, the end of the DMC marathon in quotation marks, because I mean there was a Metroid Prime video that came out completely out of left field, I'm sorry for that one, and a small filler video in order to have time to finish this video. But we are finally here with Devil May Cry 5, and oh my god, what a game! My entire reason for even doing this marathon in the first place was because I played DMC5 one long summer ago and wanted to try out the rest of the series. So now that I am here, it is time to see how my stances on the game have changed after having so much experience with the rest of the series. If you want the summary of my opinions up to now, DMC1 was good but outdated, DMC2 was outdated 3 months before it even came out, DMC3 was great and when the series finally adopted its modern form of gameplay, DMC4 was good but not great, and DMC Devil May Cry is the underrated game that actually does many things better than its predecessors. It's been a while since I even played DMC5 completely, so after playing all these games I was curious to see how my opinions of the game have changed. So after playing the game in New Game Plus to see the game at its full potential, how are my stances on the game? But were you expecting any different? No, sir! The story goes as follows. Dante needs to pay his rent, and because of that takes up a big job in which he needs to defeat a demon who recently reawakened and is also responsible for making Nero crippled. I mean, bro got thrown around like a doll and then got his arm removed like a Lego. Me, personally? The demon causes chaos and then the DMC crew goes all the way up the tree to defeat the demon, but they fail miserably, and Nero and newcomer B have to make a retreat to get stronger to defeat the demon, which is called Urizen. That's basically the story for the first 10 or so missions until they make their way up the tree again and Dante comes back into the story, because while Lady and Trish were captured, Dante was taking a nap. He was sleeping for a month, what the hell? Dante comes back and then decides to just kill himself, now! And beat Urizen while he's at it, who then goes to the bottom of the tree after we climbed all the way up? Then you go down and finally beat him, but then B comes in. And earlier it's basically revealed that B is really one half of Virgil with Urizen being the other. And then they combine once again and have one of the rawest intros in the history of video games ever. You can't tell me that anyone with the title The Alpha and the Omega is not raw as hell. Virgil appears, leaps to the top of the tree, and then it is revealed that Nero is Virgil's son, which was very obvious if you played DMC4, but whatever. One climbing session later and Dante and Virgil start throwing hands like they always do, but Nero regrows his arm just in time to stop them and then beats the shit out of both of them. Then they go to hell and close off the portal between the human and demon worlds until the next game comes out in the year 2029. Is Nero's arm like a plant? I know I summarized the story in the worst way possible, and I made some jokes here and there. Well, actually, I really like the story. It's simple, but it gets to the point and tells his story very well. I actually ended up caring for Nero way more than I did during 4, and Virgil surprisingly grew a lot as a character, realizing his past mistakes while he was separated into 2. Nero is a much more interesting character in 5, and 4 he just really felt like for half of the game, he was just kind of there because of contractual obligations, and in the latter half of the game, he was there because mi pancito bimbo! The characters in the game are just absolutely wonderful, and I know I say that for every game, but really, the personality in the DMC games are like half the charm. The game is just really funny when it wants to be. So many moments I was just chuckling and having the stupidest grin because it was all really charming. I feel like any argument otherwise is cancelled out by Dante dancing like Michael Jackson, and honestly, I would not have it any other way. The game also looks beautiful. It uses the Resident Evil engine. I mean, I think it's the Resident Evil engine, because I don't know a lot of things that have this for an acronym. I'm gonna keep the graphics talk short. I think the animations are great, the graphics perfectly fit the series. It's all just very good as a whole. The gameplay is a huge improvement from literally everything else in the series. They decided to change the ways in which the levels were structured. In the DMC1, 3, and 4, the levels were all interconnected and had you explore back and forth the areas, which was nice but could get annoying and tiresome in some other cases. Now in DMC5, most of the stages take place in completely disconnected areas and have the stages be more linear than ever before. Now I know that some people may be disappointed by the change in structure, but really I think it works very well. The disconnected structure allows the game to take liberties in how to tell the story. It can jump back and forth, do flashbacks, do levels inside of the flashbacks, and overall makes the story structure more flexible. The only thing that does feel lesser in the levels is that the levels oftentimes feel way more basic than the prior games. While it's not bad, the stages do feel like they have less things going on inside of them, and they don't have a lot to compensate that, and as a result, it can just feel like the levels are just break sessions between the meat of the game. The game is divided into 3 characters, Nero and B, and later into the story you get to play as Dante. First of all, praise the heavens, they actually switched the characters throughout the story. I was so disappointed in DMC4 when I realized that the game didn't switch perspectives between Nero and Dante until Nero started sleeping halfway through the game. But in this game, you will play so much as Nero, then switch back to V, and back to Nero, but then V, but then you switch Dante, and it just keeps the characters fresh. Although, even if that wasn't the case, there's a very high chance that I wouldn't even care that much right now, because honestly, the characters are just fun as hell! Nero is essentially the same from his DMC4 appearance if we exclude the detachable arm. Now in this game he features Devil Breakers, which are different types of mechanical weapons made by his good friend Nicoletta Goldstein, which oddly enough is the daughter of one of the bosses of 4? Fun fact, I guess? Apart from that, he's essentially the same. Exceed is back, his combo game is very similar, although greatly expanded. It's really the Devil Breakers that change up the game and make Nero's gameplay much more diverse as a result. My greatest complaint with Nero in the last game was that the gameplay could get stale after a while because there's no added mechanics to the game after you unlock the basic combos, and the progression flatlines because of it. The Devil Breakers add variety because they're constantly adding new mechanics and different attacks to the game, and they also have some interesting strategy behind of them. They are a limited resource and the game will punish you for playing poorly by destroying the Devil Breakers should you get hit while using them, or alternatively you could unleash an ultimate attack which leads to the tank blowing up, or simply pressing a button to destroy them. It all depends, but you gotta be strategic when using them, or play the game well. The only problem I had is that in the New Game Plus I accidentally kept blowing up the Devil Breakers because to activate Devil Trigger you press a button on the D-pad, while for the other characters it's the R1 button, which for Nero is the button that destroys the Devil Breakers, and I know I can customize the controls, but honestly I just got used to it eventually. Speaking of which, Nero in New Game Plus regains his lost abilities from 4 while keeping the normal abilities that he already gained in 5, which simply adds another layer of fun to Nero's gameplay. I genuinely love Nero's gameplay so much in this game. It's simple, but it's still as fun as Dante, and it's just, whew, it's very fun to mess around with. Also, Devil Trigger is a bad. The other character during the early parts of the game that you will play as is V, a weird character with an even more bizarre playstyle. V can barely walk straight with a cane to help him, so he's very much not able to swing shit around like the other members of the family, so instead he uses bosses from the first DMC game to help him fight these demons. Now hit YouTuber Maxor couldn't have put it any better. You tell this guy and this guy to kill things for you, and when the time comes, read. He can also summon Nightmare and basically win the game, generally doing nothing while already doing close to nothing. I will say that the idea of V is very interesting, but I feel like the execution comes short in a couple of ways. I feel like the delay between the inputs and V's pets actually doing anything that they're supposed to do is pretty significant and feels very off, so as a result it's not that good to pull off compared to other character combos. It just feels like if they had made the delay slightly less severe, then I probably would have been more interested in his gameplay, but with the delay it kind of feels like I'm doing whatever with him for a bit and then summon the Devil Trigger and win automatically. I don't think that B is a bad character necessarily, but definitely a character that just isn't for me. If there was an option to play between Dante, Nero, and V, chances are I'll probably pick Dante 7 out of 10 times, Nero 2 out of 10 times, and V 1 out of 10 times. I will say, however, Crimson Cloud is a banger. The final character from the main campaign is the man of the hour, Dante the legendary Devil Hunter. Dante is the best character out of the main 3. Dante was already one of the best action game characters in DMC4, but in DMC5 he is that on steroids. He has 4 different weapons and guns, all his styles and style switching as well, and subhuman. Dante is incredibly fun. Every one of his weapons are so damn fun. Kick and switch to the fist, or maybe use the nunchucks to have ice fire and electric attacks, use one of the 2 incredibly fun swords, or just straight up use a motorcycle. Call me Crazy Frog in this bitch. I use all the styles at nearly every moment I could, and they're all incredibly well designed. I love Royal Guard in this game so much. The sound it makes when you block something is nice. The different attacks of Gunslinger and Swordmaster are neat. And surprisingly enough, I didn't use Trickster as much as I used to, but it was still very fun whenever I could use it. Using Dante was a delight in every way, shape, and form, and it only becomes better when fighting these enemies. The enemies are the most fun that they have ever been. Basically, all of them were fun to fight, and with the new mechanics it becomes even better. And the bosses, dude! The bosses were all constantly a delight. They were challenging but fun. It felt like an actual battle between you and a more powerful enemy. The only boss that I didn't really like was that weird guy you fight as V. But honestly, with all the other bosses in this game, I feel like that is barely an inconvenience. Now, while I haven't been playing it consistently, and I don't really pay attention to the other character campaigns, I have been playing Brojo's campaign as well, and what can I say other than the fact that Brojo is simply one of the most fun characters ever? He just looks cool, and no matter the situation, he is incredibly OP. But really, what else do you need in your life? Also, very delight. The MC5 is a masterpiece. There are so many things that the game does well that the few things that it does wrong are so minuscule in the grand scheme of things. They don't matter. Everything the other games did well, this game does 10 times better and more. I have no idea how Capcom could even hope to surpass the bar that the MC5 set. But what I do know is that even if they don't do that, well, I can always hope for the music to go unbelievably hard. I cannot believe I actually finished this marathon. Honestly, it was pretty fun playing these games. For the most part, but I will not be doing that often, probably. Well, hey, that's all that I had to say about this game. I'm just a random stranger you met on the internet. But hey, just call me Pseudo.